It's a 6-month speculation challenge, and it's me versus the big guy. We've got $3,000 to spend to figure out which basketball cards will go up the most between opening night and the playoffs. Let's see who knows basketball cards better. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Market Movers video. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot, and this week I have a special guest. Jeff, is this the first time we've done a video together on the Market Movers channel?
It might be actually, Teapot. I'm honored to be on your channel.
Thank
you for having me as a guest.
My channel that I do with your blessing. So yeah, it's a pleasure.
Unfortunately, I am here to beat you today
We'll see.
I am feeling very good about my 10 card picks for this basketball season and the fact that they are all going to go up in value during the season. All of them.
Okay.
All of them.
Well, that would be a first for you. So that would be a big accomplishment.
It would be a first for me.
I'm rooting for you and our company's brand in that regard. So let me set the table a little bit here.
Yeah.
So we've got NBA tipping off tomorrow night, which will be really exciting. And it's a long season. One thing that we know, basketball cards, they tend to go up before the season. Then they kind of cool off a little bit. Some breakout candidates will actually go up during the season. But the real heat starts around the playoffs. And so if you're looking at speculation and you're looking at, which card's going up, we wanted to do a little challenge. We wanted to use Market Movers and put it to the test our knowledge too. And so I said, let's take a $3,000 budget, PSA 10 rookie cards, Prism Silvers, or Optic Hollows. That's it. No other cards. Why? Because those are typically transacting regularly. We know what, there will be sales happening of those cards. And we're gonna add those cards to a collection. We're gonna track the value over time. I'll periodically report out like who's in the lead. We'll look at it throughout the year. And then right before the playoffs, which is typically like a sell marker time, we're gonna look and see who ultimately came out on top. So that's sort of the rules. We got the $3,000 budget, we picked our cards. But before we get into that, I wanna do something else. You made a video, we're on over 5 years since you started the SCI YouTube channel, and it was like your third or fourth video about 12 basketball cards that you were investing in.
Oh boy. Back in 2019.
Back in 2019.
Back in 2019.
From your basement closet.
Oh boy.
A nice checkered shirt.
Yes.
And you went through a list of these, and you catch a lot of flack, and you have over the years for different players, and we're going to talk about some of those. But there's sort of a surprise punchline to this video 5 years later. So what I want to do is I want to go through those picks, and I want to look at those players over time and what they've done since then. So I'll tell you what they cost back in 2019. It was August 22nd, 2019.
Woo. All right.
And I'll tell you what they're worth today.
I remember a few of them.
All right.
I remember a few that I did poorly with.
Yeah,
I remember a few that I did really good with too.
Yeah. So the punchline here is, is to start out, your worst pick, believe it or not,
of the 12.
Of the 12 was Donovan Mitchell.
Donovan Mitchell was the worst pick.
Donovan Mitchell was the worst pick. If you remember, he won Rookie of the Year, and he was really strong. Did he win or did Ben Simmons win? He was in the top two.
Yeah.
But he had a great breakout rookie year. It's his 2017 Prism Silver. It was selling for $306 back then. It is now down to $144. So it's a $163 loss on the Donovan Mitchell.
Interesting.
Since then.
I would never have guessed that his cards would have gone down more than some of the other guys who I know are on the list.
So the next one is the one, it's the biggest trope. We made an April Fool's video about it, and that's Lonzo Ball.
Yeah.
So Lonzo Ball back then was $180.
Shame.
And at the time, he was trending down.
Yeah.
And you were looking at it saying, look, the analytics, 538 other sites, they all show him projected to have a good career. Frankly, maybe he would have if he hadn't been injured this entire time.
He hadn't worn his dad's shoes, perhaps.
If he hadn't worn his dad's shoes, big baller brand, and had just stayed out of that, maybe he'd still be playing. He's coming back.
Yeah.
He's coming back to play.
He is. There's actually a little bit of news about him right now. He's getting back in the cycle.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if those cards actually trend up this season.
They could.
He's not on my list for this season, though.
Depends what he does. Depends what he is a good defender and a good passer. So if the shooting touch is there, who knows? That card was at $180. It's down to $61 as of right now.
All right.
So who knows? Still low pop. Pop 274 on that card, on the Prism Silver. Mitchell Robinson was the next one.
I remembered Mitchell Robinson.
Yep.
I was really high on him.
Yeah.
He had the top player efficiency rating, I believe, of any player in the NBA.
He was like very high.
Back in 2019. And I was high on him, and it just never really materialized. Plus, and we talked about this actually in the Jeff Wilson show last week. it's also a lesson learned that he's not the even if he lived up to his potential, he's not the type of player that probably is going to see his cards really do much in the long run. People want the stars, they want the shooters, they want the points, they want the elegance. They don't want the big man in the middle who's putting up 18 a game. Like that doesn't really get anyone excited. Andre Drummond, the guy UPC, he's a great player. He's had a consistent career of being great. I mean, particularly a great rebounder. Yet, outside of you, nobody in the world collects this guy.
There's one other person at least, but yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? But he's, I mean, so it's, the card market doesn't always correlate directly to how good a player actually is. And so Mitchell Robinson was doomed from the beginning. So I'm not surprised by that.
He's down less of a loss here. He was at $76, now down to $10.51.
Oh my God, less than the grading fee.
Dollar-wise, still down. D'Angelo Russell was the next one, and he was at 103, now down to 41.
I had high hopes for him.
Yeah, a lot of people did. You thought he'd be a scoring kind of combo.
Yeah, I did.
He's had some big games. John Collins, $64.
Yeah,
He's
he was
down
a value
to 13.
pick. He was a value pick for me. Yeah, the back then it was the enticement of him and Trae Young as the 1-2 punch on the Hawks, and the Hawks
were dunk.
It felt like the Hawks were going to be an up-and-coming team, and they were going to be this great tandem, and it never really materialized.
Jaren Jackson Jr., who's had a decent career. He won Defensive Player of the Year.
Undervalued. I will go to my grave saying that Jaren Jackson Jr. is undervalued. Last season, when Ja Morant was hurt for most of the season, Jaren Jackson stepped up. He did some really nice things last season. He's like kind of Ja Morant's favorite player on that team. He's an important piece of that Memphis team.
He's still really young. He's only 25.
Yeah.
He's been in the league. He's going into basically seventh year. Math is tough. But he's 25 years old. He's down from 103 down to $60 most recently.
Okay.
The next one I know you remember. That's Landry Shamet. Yeah. $50. He was your number one pick.
That was a bad pick.
He was your number one. I know. And it was just, the
analytics liked him.
They loved him.
It was also I was also basing this off of what their card values were at the time, and I think he was the cheapest guy on the list. So he was the least expensive of the 12, and yet the analytics had a lot of positive things to say about him. So I'm like, he could be the one that could kind of surprise some people and edge up because he's the cheapest of the 12 and never happened.
He's down to $8. So
$8.
Maybe now's the
less
time
than
to buy.
Mitchell Robinson. Wow, some of these picks were pretty rough.
Jamal Murray, this is actually really funny.
I was one of my best picks.
Jamal Murray was at $153 back then. He's at $153 today.
That's criminal.
5 years later.
That's criminal.
He's at the same exact price. He's had some injuries. He's won a championship.
Yeah,
he shows up big in the playoffs.
Shows up good in the playoffs. He had that game in the bubble a couple, back in 2020.
He and Donovan Mitchell. We're going
and
back
and then he actually won the championship. I mean, he's such a key part of that Denver team. Yeah. Like that's criminal that his cards are even since 2019. That's ridiculous.
Now this next one is actually hilarious because people like to throw out Will Grier and other things, right? Landry Shamet. I've never heard anybody in the comments pointing out that you actually said to pick Kevon Looney.
Yes.
Who, by the way, was $8.50 for his PSA 10 silver.
He was the cheapest. He was right. He was cheaper.
$8.50.
That's right. I picked him. Yeah. I picked him because his cards were so crazy cheap.
Yeah, they were like a couple bucks.
Crazy cheap.
And he was like the center, for the Warriors.
And the championship team back then. And I was like, well, you know what? This guy's going to play a role. This guy's maybe just simply getting kind of riding the wave a little bit with Steph and Draymond and Clay and all these other guys will kind of boost this guy from $8 to at least $15. Yeah. I mean, come on.
So what's funny about this card is $8.50. He's out of the limelight now, big time. Yeah. That card is still, because it's Pop 25, this is PSA 10 Prism Silver, it's still $72 right now. The Kevon Looney, PSA 10 silver.
Wait, it went up from $8?
It went from $8 up to $72. That's why I'm saying it's funny because everybody wants to point out the misses, the L's, so to speak, but nobody wants to point out the ones that would have. The crazier thing is that card topped out at almost $300.
Yeah.
During the high period. So that
would
have been
had a little bit of hype around him for a little while. He did. It was a really good for a while. It was actually a really good pick.
Now the next three, this is where it gets interesting. The next three that you picked, you could argue that these were the ones maybe a little more obvious. The top one, I think, maybe wasn't so obvious. You and I were both kind of in on him for a while. But the next one's Jason Tatum. Mm-hmm. Jason Tatum was $217 at the time, now $672.
There you go.
I believe that card was up around over $2,000 at one point,
Yep.
maybe more.
And I'm happy to say I bought a lot of Jason Tatum cards back in 2019
Yeah.
when I put this video out.
Yeah.
I made a lot of money on Jason
Yeah,
Tatum.
Jason Tatum-
I actually still had some of his cards that I bought in 2019, and I sold the last of those off
Yeah.
last season when they were in the finals.
The next one's Luka.
Yep.
Luka was at $590.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, he's at a little over $1,100. And we know where that card was.
Yep.
Way up. What was it, 7,000 or something for his PSA 10
Yep.
Prism Silvers? That was the one that I said, if I had been a bachelor and not married with children and everything back in 2019 when I started getting back into this, I remember telling my wife, I would just put $10,000 into Luka Doncic right now. I believed in him. I just couldn't take that risk. And then I could have paid off my house. Like literally could have paid off my house if I had done that. He's obviously blown up a lot. And the last one.
Would you put $10,000 into Luka today?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Well, we'll see if he's on your list. We'll see if he made your top 10 or not for this season.
We'll see. And the last one is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander,
Yes.
who was $80
Yes.
and is now $623.
Yes.
And who may or may not be on my list.
Yes,
because he
Shai
is
yes, big
very
time.
talented.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, incredible talent.
So
that was that Shai worked out really well for
that
me.
was
I
12
bought a
cards.
bunch of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander cards back in
Yeah,
2019
yeah.
as well.
Yeah, that was 12 cards.
Yep.
And everybody wants to show all these little clips and snippets of the Landry Shemmets and the Mitchell Robinsons. And
So how did I
Lonzo
do
Balls.
overall though?
That would have, ironically, I didn't even know this. It would have totaled up the cost back then to $2,000, would be now worth $3,000.
There you go.
$1,000. You could be rolling that money into your picks
There you
for
go.
this NBA season.
There you go.
Up $1,000.
So that's interesting. Despite some really bad picks,
Yes.
clearly very bad picks, despite some clearly bad picks, I had enough picks that really worked out well
Yeah.
that overall I'm up 33% on
Yeah.
my card picks from 5 years ago.
Bingo. Yeah,
Interesting.
interesting.
Good to know.
So
I have
we're-
not gone back and
yeah.
looked at that. That's
Now,
interesting.
It's a different story now.
Yep.
5 years later, the sports card market's very different than it was back then. Speak to that a little bit. What's
Oh,
different
yeah.
from 2019 when you were honestly learning?
Oh, it's
You
a
were
much
saying,
tougher
"I'm learning,"
game today.
And now you know a thing or two, and what's it like today?
Sure. Well, the thing or two that I know is that the exercise that we're about to do is fraught with risk.
Yeah.
We're both about to pick 10 cards that we think will go up this season. That's a very difficult proposition. We've seen some years, 2021, 2022, 2023, to a degree, less so in 23, where you could pick just about any card. And for a while there, they were actually dropping in value. It was the opposite in 2019. You could pick just about any card, was going up in value in 2019, 2020. Now the last three, they've gone down in value. I think we're finally to a more stable point. This year, I actually enjoyed doing the top 5 shows more this year than probably any other year, because this was the first year where I felt like the player performance really had an impact, a true impact on the card prices, and the overall market wasn't impacting them as much.
Yeah.
You know, you saw situations in 2022, I think that was the year when Vlad Guerrero Jr. almost got the Triple Crown.
Yeah.
You know, it was an
Yeah.
incredible season. Yet his cards actually were slightly down over the course of the season, despite almost getting the Triple
That
Crown.
happened with Acuna last year.
Yeah. And so you know, whereas conversely in like 2019, you could have, you know, any of those guys in the list, they were, Mitchell Robinson was tripling in 2019, right?
Yeah.
Any of those guys were. So you could, but this year it seems to be a little more true. So you can make money. You can buy a bunch of these cards as we're about to go through at the beginning of the season and have some of them be worth more at the end of the season. Yeah. But there's also tons of other people out there trying to do it as well.
Yep.
It's a tough game. And so I guess what has changed for me is I do a little bit of this. I do a little bit of what we're about to talk about. I will buy some of these cards and speculate some. But the vast majority of my sports card money these days is going into older, safer stuff.
Sure.
You know, Kobe and LeBron. We're talking basketball. Kobe and LeBron. I got a ton of that. Steph Curry.
Yeah.
Vintage. I bought a Pistol Pete Maravich
Yep.
rookie auto at Fanatic. That kind of stuff. I love that kind of stuff. Tons of Jordan. I got all kinds of Jordan and
Yeah.
Charles Barkley. And that's, it's your safer bet.
Well, we unpacked a lot more of this in the Jeff Wilson
Yes.
show video that we did recently. So if you're interested in more of that, go watch that or listen to that video as well. but we got to get into these picks.
Oh, I'm excited.
We got to get into these picks.
I'm excited.
So what I'm going to do, I'm adding all of this to a Market Movers collection. And in Market Movers, you can create categories and add cards to different categories. So I'm looking at the summary on my screen of that 2019 Jeff Investments, and I'm going to switch to my picks for this year over, and I'm happy to report I'm already up $33 from yesterday when I put these into the collection. So that's great. But we're going to get into these picks, and we're going to work from least confident that they'll go up down to what we're most confident in that will go up. And I'll kick us off at number 10 with mine. This is one that I'm not super confident in. There's been some buzz around this player. He showed some flashes last year, and I think he figures to get good minutes. He's down 33% over the last 60 days. One of the reasons why I wanted to throw him in here. I just don't know if his team's really a playoff caliber team. In fact, I don't think they are, so it's a concern when we're going to snap a chalk line going into the playoffs. But that's Keontae George. His Prism Silver, $74 right now for his cards. And he's a player who could, I don't know, I could see him, boosting his stats up like 20, 25, 30% this year. So if that card to me got to maybe the $100, $110 point by the end of the year, I think that's a win for that card. And the floor, conversely, if he repeats what he did last year, I think the floor on it is maybe like 60. So I don't know. I think there's some upside.
I like that pick. I think that's a smart pick. Okay, so to create my list of 10, I used this is actually kind of a throwback to the stuff I would do back in 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
I used a specific methodology.
Okay.
And I'm not going to tell you what it is now, but it will become clear as the video goes on. So my first pick is the biggest star, I'd say, at this point on the New York Knicks.
Okay.
The Knicks won 50 games last year. This year, they're actually projected to win 55. So even though they had a great year last year and they, made a great playoff run and they were kind of everybody's darling, this year they're expected to do even better. Specifically, I'm going for Jalen Brunson, and his 2018 Optic Holo PSA 10 sits at $192 today. So I'm going to take Jalen Brunson as my number 10 pick.
All right, I'm going to add these to your collection category, by the way, as we go. So I'm locking in these prices.
So yeah, we got Brunson's 2018 Optic Holo.
Optic Holo
PSA
Brunson.
10.
And you went with that. Was it because you're working within the budget, or was there something you liked about the Holo?
I would have probably preferred the Prism Silver. Now, that's an interesting question. In a couple of cases here, I picked between the Silver and the Holo what I thought was the better value based upon current prices. But for the most part, I had to work within the $3,000 budget, so at times I was forced to do kind of one or the other.
I did an interesting exercise yesterday trying to figure out which of those two to go with for some players using our intelligence reports tool, where you can actually compare their Prism Silver to their Optic Holo and look at all those. It's wild how different those ratios are from one player to the next, even within the same years. Like LaMelo might be 3x, but then another player is 1.2x. It's very odd, and it's not pop counts in most cases. So I did sort of a similar thing. I tried to look for value, but also tried to stay in the budget. So I like that pick with Brunson. His prices are obviously up 100% or more than 100% from last year. They're probably still lower than what they should be, and if the Knicks do what they did this year, I'm just nervous. I don't know if he can get through the upper echelon of hype, and I'm worried about that team having Towns and Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart, who's like a fan favorite, and like spreading it out, plus Mitchell Robinson. So we'll see. I do not have Brunson on my list, so that's I thought about it, but that's an interesting one. My next pick is a guy who averaged 24 points, 4.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists on 57% effective field goal percentage. A fantastic defender.
It's good numbers.
Who was on a team that was really bad last year and really good the year before. And his Prism Silver is $81 for a player with that stat line, and that is Desmond Bane.
Okay.
Desmond Bane is a fantastic player. I will admit, this is an emotional pick for me because I like Bane. I like his game. He's remarkably efficient. I think this card could go up. It's been much higher than this. He's down a ton last year because the Grizzlies sucked. So with Morant back and that team, plus they added some other pieces. They drafted Zach Edey. Jake LaRavia is looking good in preseason. That's a team that could get back into the top 5 in the West with good defense. And if they do, obviously Jaren Jackson Jr., he's going to be a big part of it. So $81, I thought that was pretty good value.
I think this is a savvy pick. I don't have him on my list, but I like that pick. I like that pick quite a bit.
All right, who's next for you?
My next guy, we're going to look at the Philadelphia 76ers.
Okay.
They're going to be better this year. They won 47 games last year. Vegas projects 51 to 52 wins this year. Obviously, they have Paul George.
Yep.
Thankfully, his injury seems like it's going to be okay. His little preseason injury that he had against the Hawks. And I think the most exciting player on that team is not Joel Embiid. I think the most exciting player on that team is Tyrese Maxey.
Sure.
So I'm going with Tyrese Maxey's 2020 Optic Holo PSA 10 at $135.
Gotcha. That was one I felt pretty confident you'd have on your list. I know you've been high on Maxey. I'm pretty high on Maxey. I think he's really good. He didn't end up making my list. He's also another guy who was up a lot last year. So that was why I was trying to think where's the opportunity for players to come up. Maybe that's the wrong way to think about it at the end of the day, because it is a lot about hype, and both of the guys you've picked so far I think have a lot of hype behind them. I think Maxey's a good pick, and I do think he's the guy that people progressively are focusing more on in terms of that buzz and appeal on the Sixers, even though Embiid's I think he's probably the fifth best player in the NBA. So,
yeah, Embiid's great.
yeah. All right, so my number 8, this was a sneaky one, and one thing that we said we could do is that if we basically got to a point where we had some budget left over, was buy multiple copies of a card. So I think you were at 1 copy of each of those first 2. Same for me. This next one I'm taking 2 copies, and I'm gaming the system only a little bit here because I found a really low recent steal of a comp on Fanatics Collect for this player. That's Kobe White. It's
Okay.
Prism Silver. He broke out last year with 19, 5, and 5. This is normally a $50 to $60 card. It sold for $36.
Okay.
I bought 2 copies of this to fill out my budget. I threw him at number 8 on my confidence list, but I think that's a pretty good value on that Prism Silver card. And with this stat line, and you look at some of these other younger guys who are selling for $100 on their PSA 10 Prism Silvers, I thought $36 was a pretty good price.
Fair.
There are a lot of them out there, I think.
I don't mind that. I don't mind that. I'm gonna turn my attention here quite a bit. This is probably a dangerous place for me to turn my attention, but I'm going to turn my attention quite a bit to the Charlotte Hornets. And I'm going to do that. The Charlotte Hornets only won 21 games last season. They were one of the worst teams in the NBA. They were absolutely horrible. This season, they're projected to be quite a bit better. Vegas thinks they're going to improve by about 10 games. That they probably jump up to 31 games. Now, that's still not going to be good enough to make the playoffs, but Vegas believes that that you are going to see positive momentum out of the Charlotte Hornets this year. I believe that could be true.
Yeah.
And when I was at Fanatics Fest, I got to meet Grant Williams, who is now on the Charlotte Hornets. He's actually a card collector when opened up the National Treasures box there and everything like that. And I asked Grant Williams, I said, who is the under the radar best up and coming player? I said, if you had to invest in any player's cards who's a bit under the radar, don't give me Wemby. Give me somebody, who would you buy?
Yeah.
And he said, without a doubt, Brandon Miller.
Yep.
He goes, this guy's the real deal.
Yep.
He said, I wouldn't be surprised if he's even as good or better than Wemby someday. Grant Williams has very high hopes for Brandon Miller. And Brandon Miller also checks a box for me because, as I said, I think the Hornets are going to be improving quite a bit. So I'm going to take 2 copies of Brandon Miller's 2023 Optic Holo PSA 10.
Okay.
They were $70 a piece, and so I'll do 2 of those because I can get 2 of those into my budget. Least expensive card that I have on the list today out of all of the cards is Brandon Miller's Optic PSA 10.
2 of these, and you
Optic
said
Holo.
it's 70 a piece, right?
70 a piece is what the price was at of Market Movers when I looked it up
That is
this
correct.
morning.
Yep, got it.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm going to add those. I thought you'd pick Brandon Miller. I remember you telling me that conversation with Grant Williams. I also think he's going to be really good. I don't know if I believe in Charlotte enough this year to move the needle. I think LaMelo, if he's healthy, is going to also have some spotlight and put up triple doubles and things like that. They've got Miles Bridges. They have a decent team. I think he takes a step forward this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see his cards go up a little bit in value. Surprisingly, they're very flat. Like Wemby's in the last month have come way down.
They have actually come down.
Brandon Miller's are very flat all the way through outside of the initial hype when they first released. So we'll see what happens with Brandon Miller. I like that pick. Number 7, I'm going with a guy that I feel like nobody is talking about anymore, and he's incredibly explosive. I would compare him to a 6'6" De'Aaron Fox. His 3-point percentage after the All-Star game last year was 36%, which was 6% better than before the All-Star game. So he's incrementally improving his shooting percentage, and he's a volume scorer, highlight reel potential, crazy dunk last year. and his team should be a playoff contender, is Jalen Green.
Okay.
Jalen Green.
Okay.
The Houston Rockets are projected to be sort of middle of the pack
Yeah,
in the West.
yeah. Houston's an exciting young team.
So I'm picking up your strategy, by the
Okay.
way, with using Vegas information to make decisions. I think we both looked at that the same way, and I like Jalen Green's potential. I think he should be in that. He might be in the most improved conversation this year. So it is his Prism Silver. It is $175 right
Okay.
now. Surprisingly cheaper than Cade Cunningham and cheaper than some other guys who are, I think, worse than he is, honestly. But yeah, obviously, we'll see what happens this year. But at $175, I locked him in.
Okay. All
Number
right.
7.
I like that. I like that. My next pick's boring. I've already spoken about Brandon Miller. I'm now simply taking his 2023 Prism Silver PSA 10. So
Doubling up.
I'm going even heavier on Brandon Miller.
Okay.
His cards were cheap to begin with, so that's why I'm actually doing 2 of Brandon Miller's different cards.
Yep.
So that'll be my number 7 spot. Will be his 2023 Prism Silver PSA 10 at $200.
$200. Got it. Okay. I'm locking you in. All right. Yep. That was the one I looked at. I looked at both of them, but I was considering his Prism Silver. I was actually kind of considering he and Jalen Green, honestly, at the same point. And I went with Green. Number 6 is a guy who I PC. It's not my main PC. It's not Drummond. But he actually has the 5th best odds right now, 6th man of the year. I think it's possibly actually works his way into starting rotation. He was recently traded, was 3rd in threes made last year in the NBA. Hit the most threes in New York Knicks history in a season as Dante DiVincenzo. He's a fantastic off-the-ball defender, which doesn't necessarily get you card price appreciation, but he's heart, he's grit. I think he fits fantastically into that Minnesota Timberwolves defense, as he did with the Knicks, both very gritty defensive-minded teams. And I see this card that is trading right now, $35.
I was going to say, it can't be very much.
I bought 2 of these.
Okay.
I think it's a $60 card come
Okay.
playoff time when the
Cool.
Wolves should have a top seed, near a top seed in the West again.
You've liked him ever since he was on the Bucks.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I
have a
remember
lot of
you
his
talking- yeah.
cards. I really like him. I've liked him, honestly, since he was with Villanova and broke Michigan's hearts.
Yep.
So I'm a fan.
Well, so for my number 6 pick, I had to get one of the Ball family, one of the Ball brothers on the list. I decided to stay away from Lonzo this year because of uncertainty around him. I'm going with LaMelo. For better or worse,
You're all in on the Hornets.
I am all in on the Hornets. I believe that they are going to be improved this year, or at least Vegas believes they're going to be improved this year. So I'm going to do LaMelo Ball's 2020 Prism Silver PSA 10. That is a $306 card. Hopefully LaMelo will excite people again. A lot of hype around this guy coming into the league. Back in 2020. It's interesting to think about. We had that run of like really kind of hyped, rookies, obviously in 2018, Trae Young and Luka, 2019, Ja Morant and Zion.
Yeah.
And then 2020, it was really LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards as well. But I would even say, like now, obviously Anthony Edwards is by far more hyped than LaMelo Ball. But I would say back then, LaMelo Ball was probably the most hyped of those 2020 rookies entering the league. And it just hasn't, has shown moments, has shown flashes, has had a lot of injury issues. Charlotte's not been good. So I'm hoping this year he finally puts it together. Charlotte shows improvement. He stays healthy, plays well. And so I feel pretty good about him as that pick.
I'll tell you what concerns me with LaMelo is his price is already decently high at $306. And in 4 seasons, he's only played 164 games.
That's
Now,
the
there
biggest
was
concern.
The COVID season in there, but yeah, in the last couple of years, only 58 games played
Yep.
in the 2 seasons.
Yep.
Knowing that his brother's been injured, he's been injured. He's very talented and he's gotten better each year. Like I said, he's kind of a triple-double threat on any given night. He can dish the ball out as well as anybody. But that was why I did not
a risk.
have LaMelo on my team.
It's a risk.
All right, at number 5, this was actually one that I had it out, I put it in, I had it out, I put it in, but the value on it and the caliber of the player and the prospect of being one of the top seeds in the East, I had to put it in here. It's Joel Embiid's Prism Silver.
Okay,
PSA
good.
10.
All right.
$793.
Okay.
This is regularly a $1,000 plus card, sometimes spiking much higher than that. This was a sale on Golden that went for $793. Like you said, they added Paul George. They added Andre Drummond back to the team. They've got Maxey. They've got pieces. Will all that help? Time will tell. Thankfully, this is before the playoffs start and not after the playoffs start, when Joel Embiid, unfortunately, historically for Philly
Tends to
fans,
happen.
hasn't played particularly well.
Yep.
So I think he'll be, top 5 in MVP again,
Yeah.
if not top 2, and so we'll see what happens.
Okay. So that's
793.
interesting. So I see you gamed this a little bit. You looked for unusually low sales
I
that
did.
occurred
I
right
used price
before.
movements.
Interesting. I didn't use that strategy. That was a pretty good strategy, because what that means is that if that one even sells for what the last 30-day average has been as the next sale, you're already up,
be up 20, 30%.
30% on that card. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yep.
All right, my guys are going to have to do some work to overcome that, and that's okay. I feel good about my guys. Teapot, I'm going with a team that you're very familiar with.
Okay.
But a player who I feel like you've kind of abandoned. So I'm going to scoop him over to my team
Okay, you're
and
recruiting.
believe in him this year.
Okay.
It's the Detroit Pistons,
Yep.
and it is Cade Cunningham.
Sure.
You've thrown this guy. He's your guy, and you've
Yeah.
thrown him out to the side of the road.
Yeah.
You said we're moving on from him, where Detroit is dead to you. Yet Detroit, who only won 14 games last season, only won 14. Vegas thinks they're about 12 games better this season. They're going to show improvement. They can't really get any worse. Cade Cunningham's going to show improvement. I think there'll be a little bit of hype around them this year as they start to show that improvement. So I'm going to take 2 copies
Okay.
of Cade Cunningham's 2021 Optic Hollow
Okay.
PSA 10. That is a $72 card. So I'm going for a
copies.
little bit of value in there. $72 card, 2 copies of that one.
Listen, Cade, if you're watching, I'm rooting for you. As a Detroit sports fan, I've developed a defense mechanism to stop becoming emotionally invested into having any hope ever that any of these teams will actually be good. And then they can prove me wrong, and then I can be really excited about them, like the Tigers did this year, like the Lions did last year. I just stay emotionally detached. I want to see Cade shine. I want to see him stay healthy. I want to see Detroit rebound. I don't know how I'd feel about Cade Cunningham prices the week before the playoffs or going into the playoffs, but hey, let's hope. I did see they were plus 10,000 odds to win this championship this year, so maybe you put $1 on that too and see where that goes. But yeah, Cade Cunningham. Okay, all right. So that was your number 5 pick.
Yep.
Number 4. This was another one. I couldn't believe the price really on this, looking at it in historical context. This is a card that actually just sold for the lowest over the last month that it has sold for in the last 4 years. Okay. And that is Jason Tatum's Prism Silver PSA 10, which sold
Really?
for $672.
Wow, that's
That is
disappointing.
the lowest
Wow.
price. And
Gosh.
it's multiple times. This was not a fluky low sale.
Yeah.
I think it was actually down at its lowest, like $630. He just won the championship.
I know, come on,
And they're the
people.
favorites to win the championship again.
Yep.
And he's a top 10 player in the NBA.
Yep.
Like, I know he didn't get played in the Olympics, but I mean, I would put him at top 10, top 15 for sure. $672. I think this card is another one that should be easily at least 800, 850 going into the playoffs. If Boston has the 1 seed in the East, they'll be competing with a few other teams for that spot. But I think they'll be the favorites to win the championship again this year going to the playoffs. And
Interesting.
so I snagged a Jason Tatum 1 copy of that at $672.
All right. Well, my number 4 card, I'm going Cade Cunningham again,
boy.
Teapot. I'm going heavy
gosh.
Cade Cunningham. I'm going
Wow.
to take his 2021 Prism Silver PSA 10. That is a $300 card. I'm going
is.
to do 1 copy of that. I feel like they're going to be on the rise. I feel like they're going to be on the rise this year, and there will be a little bit of renewed buzz around Cade.
Cade, Charlotte Hornets. This was a strategy.
It's a strategy.
This is a
We'll see
strategy.
if it pays off.
We'll
I
see.
think it will. I'm looking for most improved. I'm looking for players and teams that are going to be contenders for most improved this year, because most improved, if they realize that, most likely means their card's going to be going up.
My next one is for a guy whose name I've already mentioned once in passing, and he's freakishly athletic. His team was 3rd in the West 2 years ago and just added one of the 3 best mid-range shooters in the league, DeMar DeRozan, the Sacramento Kings, and that's De'Aaron Fox,
Yep.
who is, was the poster child for Gary Vee's enthusiasm about
Yes.
the card market many years
Yep.
ago, and he's a fantastic player. The problem is in the NBA, there's a lot of fantastic guards. Almost every team seems to feature 1, if not 2, fantastic guards now. And De'Aaron Fox has gotten kind of lost in the shuffle out in Sacramento, but he's really good. And this was another one. This is a card that's regularly $150. I checked this. It looks like a real sale. I don't know what happened. It went for $63. $63 for De'Aaron Fox Prism Silver PSA 10. even at $150, I was looking at him saying, I think he could have some more hype around him. Ring the bell or light the bell or whatever they do out there. There was a lot of energy around him a few years ago. So I went with D-Fox. Doug would be proud.
Okay. I think they're lighting the beam, aren't they? Lighting the beam?
Something like that.
Yeah, it's a beam.
There you
I
go.
think it's a
Light
beam,
the
not a bell.
Thank you. Yeah. They'll
For,
call me casuals in the comments now.
for my number 3, I really wanted to put Victor Wembanyama on the list. I wanted to get Wemby in here.
Yep.
And I'm going to get him in the number 3 spot with 2 copies of his Optic Holo PSA 10 rookie, $389 each. So money-wise, I'm going heavier into Wemby than any of the other players that I have mentioned so far. And the reason why is I think the Spurs are going to show quite a bit of improvement this year. Vegas thinks so as well. Spurs won 22 games last season. Vegas thinks they're about 13 to 14 games better this season, could contend for a playoff spot this season, a low playoff spot. So I think there's going to be improvement coming from the Spurs.
Yeah.
Popovich, fantastic coach. I'm sure he's going to get the best out of that team.
Yep.
Wemby, he's been able to stay healthy. He looks like an athletic freak. It's year 2 of Wemby, and I think it's going to be a great year 2 for Wemby. I'm excited. I consider to go even heavier into Wemby, especially since his prices had come down a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite as excited about him as I am number 1 and number 2, so I backed off slightly. But I'm very happy to have 2 copies of his Optic Holo PSA 10.
Well, that's interesting, and I'll tell you why that pick's interesting in 2 picks. I'm interested to see, they brought Chris Paul in, right, to the Spurs?
Yep.
I don't know what his actual contribution will be as a player, but as a player coach,
Sure. Could be good.
leadership with the team could be big. There's been rumors that he wants to get into coaching, head coaching, when he's done playing in the league, and he's one of the more cerebral players ever to play basketball, honestly. So that could be interesting to see what the impact. But yeah, Wemby, I'll talk more about him in a minute, maybe. My number 2 pick, going back to the well with Kentucky, and that's a guy we talked about, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Prism Silver, $601. I have him as my 4th best player in the NBA. And honestly, if you were drafting teams, I think some people could make a case, depending on what roster you're building and how you want to construct it, to take Shai over Luka. Similar stat lines, Luka more offensive, like maybe just take over a game, but Shai's better defensively. But I like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander a lot. I like Oklahoma City Thunder this year. They were the 1 seed in the West going into the playoffs last year. Their youth showed up in the playoffs, and obviously they didn't make it to the finals. But they added Alex Caruso. They've got talent that keeps developing. I know we've talked about Chet Holmgren and what types of leaps can he take this year. So I'm excited about it. $601. I think that card's really undervalued relative to Anthony Edwards, relative to Luka Doncic, relative to Wembanyama. So I think that's easily a $700, $750 card come playoff time this year, and with Shai putting another year of 36 and 5, in front of him, I don't know. I don't think you can go wrong, honestly.
I like it. I like Shai. Okay, so I'm going to do my number 1 and my number 2 pick together.
Okay.
Same player.
All right.
I'm going to take his Prism Silver PSA 10 and his Optic Holo PSA 10 rookie card. Feel very, very good. I recognize there's some risk, but I feel like there's a ton of upside when it comes to Ja Morant. And Ja Morant is back. He's back, baby. Memphis, they will be the most improved team. So much so that Vegas thinks they're going to be 21 games better this season. That is one of the biggest projected improvements, if not the biggest in history, in terms of what Vegas thinks how much better. And of course, Morant missed almost all of last season, had the suspension, came back, had the injury, out again for, only played, 6 games last year. And so him coming back, massive difference. Really love the addition of Edey from the draft. Love that. I'm excited about Desmond Bane, as you said, Jaren Jackson Jr. They got a lot of pieces on that team. I think Ja's going to make a difference. I think Memphis is going to be one of the best teams in the West. They're going to go from 27 wins to 48 according to Vegas, possibly 50 or more. I think they got the potential to do. Ja Morant's going to lead the way. He's going to remind everybody why he was such a coveted player back in 2019. His Prism Silver PSA 10 is $541. His Optic Holo PSA 10 is $250. I will happily pay those prices all day long. He's my number 1 and my number 2 pick.
I looked at Ja long and hard, I figured he'd make his way into your list. I didn't know that he'd be 1 and 2 on your list. I'm nervous about Ja. I think this is a case of Teapot overthinks it again. And I've accused myself of that. I've done this in the past. I overthink it. I over-rationalize the market. And I look at all the card prices, and I go, there's no reason why Ja's prices right now should be the same as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's. But they are. They're optic hollows. I think last week, I don't know, they were he was more expensive than Shai. He's a little less on his Prism Silver, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into the value of a player, a lot of stuff. And the thing to me, though, was he hasn't come down as much as I would have thought he would through everything he's been through over the last couple of years. He's actually held stronger than I would have thought. So, I don't know. We'll see with Ja. How high can he go? I don't know, but I figured you'd take him at some point on your list. So, none of your picks surprised me, really, at all.
It's interesting. Our lists were so different.
We almost had no overlap. And
I don't know who's your number one,
my
though.
number one is Wemby's Optic
Okay.
Hollow PSA 10.
I figured you put a Wemby
One
there.
copy, though, so I have a
Okay.
major dilemma here.
Right.
I have to root that card doesn't go up
Right.
because you took
I
two
took
of them.
two copies.
And I took one. So
Right.
my most confident pick was this Wemby, and my most confident pick was Wemby overall. There's tons of hype into him, obviously, already. But I'm looking at his charts, and over the last 30 days,
Yeah, they got
all
down.
look like this.
I'm surprised they moved down. I actually thought they would kind of move up a little bit.
I was like,
going
did I
into the
miss that he
season.
broke his leg or something?
Yeah.
Like, why are all of his
Yeah.
card prices coming down? I don't know if some of that has to do with like the Topps Chrome release,
It
and the
might have
Mercury
been.
release,
It
and
might
other
have been,
stuff
yeah.
like coming
Yeah.
out. There's more cards hitting, but he's come down a lot. And I did this analysis of the number one picks from a few years ago. By the way, I am a little surprised you didn't take Paulo Banchero.
Yeah.
But
I really like Banchero a lot. I've
yeah.
been high on him all.
Right.
I just decided to stick with a formula.
Yeah.
And the Magic, Vegas doesn't have the Magic. In fact, Vegas, I believe, had the Magic projected to win this same exact number of games this year as they did last year.
I think that's.
And they had a good season last year. So that's
He's
the
up
only
too. He's up.
Yeah.
He's up
Yeah.
over the, since the season ended. He's
Yeah.
up.
And so I was like, I'm just going to stick to the formula of most improved teams, most improved players.
Yeah.
But I do still like him.
I think Wemby, like, I almost forget how good his season was last year and how unique it was.
Yeah.
There are so many parallels right now to Victor Wembanyama and Shohei Ohtani in terms of just the uniqueness of what they're bringing to their respective sports. And I think I would actually say he's a lock to win Defensive Player of the Year this year, as long as he's healthy, obviously. I think he's going to put up 26 and 12, maybe more. 5 assists. He was at 4.5 last year. 5 steals and blocks combined this year, which is where he was last year, maybe more. I think he makes NBA All-Team, First Team for sure again, and maybe NBA all third or even second team. Who knows? Maybe All NBA First Team. Like, he's going to have a fantastic season. He's just a freak. Like, there's nothing he can't do, and he keeps getting better and better. So now I'm a little frustrated. The big dilemma I had was I almost loaded up on more Wemby instead of Embiid. I almost took either his Prism Silver or more hollows to not take the Embiid, but the price point on the Embiid was what made me go, where can the Wembys realistically go? His Prism Silver, it could go up to $2,000 by the end of the season, from $1,000 maybe, but I just felt like there was more I got maybe a little too conservative. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It's going to be fun to watch.
We'll see.
It's going to be a fun NBA season. It's
Well,
going to be fun to watch this over the next 6 months and see who does better.
Okay, I gotta check your balance.
Curious to see what people in the comments think.
Now I have to refresh this and check your balance to make sure we're all squared away on the ledger here. Let's see, Jeff 2425, well done, right at the $3,000 mark.
Yeah.
With
what do you have me at?
$2,990.
There we go.
Summarized.
See? Perfect.
So,
just snuck in right underneath.
All right. Good luck, sir.
Good
It's
luck
gonna
to
be
you.
Fun. We'll check in on this periodically throughout the year. Like I said, obviously we'll be covering the NBA season and how that's impacting cards. So we'll talk about this, and then we'll set a reminder on our calendar to look before the playoff season and see who won. And we didn't bet anything on this, but you can give me a box of something when I win, and we'll call it square.
Good luck to you.
All right. Hey, thanks so much for everybody for watching. If you want to use Market Movers, as always, go to marketmoversapp.com. If you use promo code DIVE, D-I-V-E, at checkout, you can try it for 14 days completely for free, and then you get 20% off for life off any plan. Get access to all this data. Start your own competition. Tell your friends. Build out your collections. Track them over time. Bet them for a box of sports cards and have fun with it. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Happy investing. Keep on collecting and make sure to have fun.